We are off and running into a new psalm today. Not a lot of time ahead of us right now. We're just going to lay out this psalm, read it together, and then I'm going to send you into Monday. But let me give you a little bit of a flyby of what this psalm is so you know what we're in store for. This says in Psalm 74 is the psalm, and it's called a Maskil of David, which is simply, not David, of Asaph. The phrase, the title, implies that it is either written by or for or in connection to Asaph or one of his descendants. Now, the reason we would say, well, this is likely not written by Asaph is that it recounts devastation. It recounts the destruction of Jerusalem, and especially the temple, and that did not happen during the life of Asaph. So it's possible, it's probable, I should say, that this is referring to the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem. It could also be related to the Maccabean era, where the Syrian Greek king Antiochus Epiphanes destroyed and desecrated the temple. One of those two. The destruction sounds more like the Babylonian time, but the description later in the psalm that there is no prophet remaining lends to the fact that it could have been that intertestamental Maccabean period when there were no prophets. Because in the Babylonian time, there were prophets. Jeremiah was one of them. He was alive and well in Jerusalem and preaching and letting people know. But maybe this is right after Jeremiah. So there's a lot of ambiguity. There's no certainty on when this was written, except for it was clearly during a time of national grieving and deep remorse and deep suffering in the wake of the devastation of Jerusalem. So this psalm comes out of hardship. It is written and expressed in the middle of grief. And so, along with others that we studied, this is a raw psalm. It's one of these that is kind of like, God, how long? Why are you doing this? What are you doing? How are you active in all of this? Please come back around to save us and rescue us. And please don't let us experience your wrath and your absence any longer. Please don't forget your covenant. We know you are this God. We know you have done all these things, but we don't feel it or see it. And right now we're just devastated. So this is a window into the souls of the people. Now listen, there were two kinds of people in Jerusalem during the Babylonian takeover, okay? There were those who had rejected God, who had followed false prophets, who were worshiping false gods. And this psalm is really not written by or for those people. They're the God rejectors. They're the ones who the wrath of God was truly intended for. The judgment was truly falling on them. But there was also in that mix this remnant of people, and you would call them God followers. They were devoted. They never stopped believing. They were listening to the prophets. They were genuinely and sincerely worshiping God. But you might call them collateral damage, but not really. I don't like that phrase because there's no collateral, there's no incidental situations in God's economy. But let me say it this way. God had called these people to be alive at this time, to follow him through hardship. As he was unfolding his judgment around them, he promised that he would preserve them. Even those going to exile in Babylon, that was their preservation. And so God was at work very deeply, very profoundly, and very personally in the lives of these people. But the psalm before us is going to show us their emotions and their prayer. It's a prayer, okay? And the first few verses of the prayer, 4 parts to this. The first few verses of the prayer are just kind of a why we're praying. And then the rest of the psalm is what we're praying. And or maybe I'm reversing that. Maybe it's what we're praying for. God, do this. And the rest of the psalm is why. That's what it is. The rest of the psalm is, here's why we're praying these things and why we feel that our prayer is warranted, is justified. We have grounds on which to pray. So we're going to learn a lot as we go through this psalm. I don't think it'll take us as many days to get through this psalm as it did Psalm 73. There are 23 verses before us, but I think we'll move a little quicker. So let me just read it, and then I'm going to sign off for the day. Let's read it together. Psalm 74, verse 1. O God, why hast thou cast us off forever? Why doth thine anger smoke against the sheep of thy pasture? Remember thy congregation, which thou hast purchased of old, the rod of thine inheritance, which thou hast redeemed. This Mount Zion, wherein thou hast dwelt. Lift up thy feet unto the perpetual desolations, even all that the enemy hath done wickedly in the sanctuary. Thine enemies roar in the midst of thy congregations. They set up their ensigns for signs. A man was famous according as he had lifted up axes upon the thick trees. But now they break down the carved work thereof at once with axes and hammers. They have cast fire into thy sanctuary. They have defiled by casting down the dwelling place of thy name to the ground. They said in their hearts, let us destroy them together. They have burned up all the synagogues of God in the land. We see not our signs. There is no more any prophet, neither is there among us any that knoweth how long. O God, how long shall the adversary reproach? Shall the enemy blaspheme thy name forever? Why withdrawest thou thy hand, even thy right hand? Pluck it out of thy bosom. For God is my King of old, working salvation in the midst of the earth. Thou didst divide the sea by thy strength. Thou breakest the heads of the dragons in the waters. Thou breakest the heads of Leviathan in pieces, and gavest him to be meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness. Thou didst cleave the fountain and the flood. Thou driest up the mighty rivers. The day is thine, the night also is thine. Thou hast prepared the light and the sun. Thou hast set all thy borders of the earth. Thou hast made summer and winter. Remember this, that the enemy hath reproached, O Lord, and that the foolish have blasphemed thy name. O deliver not the soul of thy turtle dove unto the multitude of the wicked. Forget not the congregation of thy poor forever. Have respect unto the covenant, for the dark places of the earth are full of the habitations of cruelty. O let not the oppressed return ashamed. Let the poor and needy praise thy name. Arise, O God, plead thine own cause. Remember how the foolish man reproacheth thee daily. Forget not the voice of thine enemies. The tumult of those that rise up against thee increaseth continually. So a prayer uttered from the darkness. That's what's before us, the very real experience of a child of God crying out to God from the grips of pain and loss and suffering. So there are some statements in here that are experiential, but they're not substantial. Okay, they're not reality. They're the experience. They're the perception of the follower of God. For instance, I'll just drop this and then we'll go. Why have you cast us off forever? Well, he didn't. He never has. He never will. But the sense of it was, God's totally forsaken us. So the big takeaway, my friend, is even when you feel like God has totally forsaken you, he is still listening to your prayer, because he not only heard this prayer, he inspired it. He preserved it as his word to us, so we would know he's listening even when we think he is nowhere to be found. So happy Monday, my friend. We'll see you tomorrow.